Successful ever British exports, in fact just British films generally, were these, the brilliant Carry On films. The saucy seaside humour, postcard, that sort of thing, really kind of made famous by the brilliant Donald McGill. A lot of the jokes and the story ideas were based on some of the cards that were so popular during the 1920s, 30s and 40s and 50s when people sent cards home from holiday. You know, the ooh, whoops, misses, that type of thing. Now, the Carry On films went on to be a very spectacular success, starting out in the late 1950s and creating stars of so many people. I mean, truly, it was like a vast repertory company of stars that did so well from the association with the Carry On movies. I was lucky enough to meet so many of those stars and interview them, including the brilliant and late Kenneth Williams, very difficult man to deal with, but nonetheless a comedy genius. Bernard Cribbins, lucky enough to meet him, Leslie Phillips, Cherie Hewson, Barbara Windsor, and they all had differing degrees of whether they liked or whether they liked being associated with the Carry On movies. Now, over here in the United Kingdom recently, there's just been a documentary screened on one of the main channels, basically called Carry On and Scandals. It's all about the backstories of how certain members didn't feel particularly well loved over on that particular set or indeed series of films. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because most of the stars, sadly, have now left us, including, you know, the brilliant June Whitfield. Loved her, but she was associated with so many comedy legends, right from Tony Hancock through to the ubiquitous Terry and June. Now, at an event in the 90s, I was lucky enough to meet the producer of the Carry On movies, Peter Rogers. Notoriously difficult at times to deal with, very much stringent in his money-making efforts, and didn't like to spend too much money on the productions. In fact, he valued himself and being able to turn a Carry On film around literally for so little money that it made so much at the box office. Now, this particular sort of element of the documentary stated that so many stars were unhappy by the way that they eventually got paid. Now, let's not forget, an average star would maybe pick up £2,500 to £3,000 for a 6-week shoot. Maybe the men could pick up £5,000 depending on their star name and quality. The bigger problem really started in the 90s and things when DVDs and videos came out with those said films making even more money once again. Compilations were put out on TV, clip shows were done, and of course there were stage shows. But as Peter Rogers pointed out to me at that event at Pinewood Studios all those years ago, no one put a gun to the head to these stars. They came back time and time again for the agreed fee with their agent. He said that he saw them all as, you know, very difficult people in many respects because they wouldn't openly moan to him, but moan to each other. And they even once tried to put together a coup to see if they could get some money back via legal means, but seemingly not. Now, what was interesting with Peter Rogers, he wasn't up there, say, with the moguls of the Hollywood sphere like Harry Cohen, Louis B. Mayer, Daryl F. Zanuck, but he certainly knew how to turn a film around. And it does seem strange, doesn't it, in this particular era, where when these people are sadly deceased, so many of them in fact, that their lives are turned over and they're created into monsters. What Peter Rogers, along with Gerald Thomas, did was create a series of movies that are still well loved by all. Perhaps not the PC Vote Brigade, but literally they're still getting viewers in their millions each time they're repeated on TV. Now, I spent an afternoon once in the London Palladium #1 dressing room with none other than Jim Dale. Now, Jim Dale, of course, was the suave, debonair, young, sort of beefcake actor of the Carry On movies. He knew the power of those films, and he knew himself to basically use his name associated with such a well-loved brand. Yes, he may have not been happy with the lack of money coming forward, but he also knew the association and the worldwide fame that the Carry Ons gave him. Sadly, so many of the other stars seemingly didn't seem too happy. But again, as Peter Rogers pointed out to me, without the Carry Ons, where would they have been? And with the Carry Ons, he gave them a name that was known around the world to do what they would like with. They could have moved into other movies, stage work, pantomime, summer seasons. So many of them did. So many of them had very lucrative careers. But sadly, of course, there's always one or two that slip through the net. But was that truly the responsibility of the brilliant producer Peter Rogers, or indeed the person's own fault? Whichever way you look at it, it's very hard, isn't it, in this 21st century, to see exactly how now the modern world wants to paint these, some might say, geniuses of entertainment. He left behind a wonderful legacy and in his later years signed over many millions to a charitable rest home, all for actors and actresses. So truly, it can't have been all that bad. But if you watch that documentary, seemingly so. As ever, if you haven't checked out the Carry On films, do have a look at some of the clips online. If you're looking for a chuckle, this is a brilliant way to start your day. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.